Awesome, Nate. So flying solo here today without Joe Quattrucci. It's awesome to talk to you right before the holidays. So, I mean, let's dive right into it, man. Tell us a little bit about who you are. I mean, our audience might not know exactly who you are and what you're all about. So tell us like who you are and bring us back before now and give us a little picture of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thanks for having me on. Really glad to be here. My name is Nate Joens. I am the co-founder and head of innovation of Structurally. Past CEO, we brought in a CEO this year, which was really exciting to kind of take the lead and evolve us to the next stage of our business. But kind of how I got here was, Structurally is my first and only job. I always like to say that. I transitioned straight from college into Structurally. What I always like to say there too is it was a really easy transition actually going from eating ramen noodles in college to ramen noodles at my startup. So it worked out perfectly.
I love it. Ramen noodles. I remember when I was completely broke in college and my wife and I were just starting out, we would always do a soft boiled egg to try and like doll it up and make ourselves feel fancier. So, I
like to scramble the egg and put it in there. So, same thing basically, but yeah, it was the ramen transition, but glad I did it. I studied urban planning and GIS, which is basically mapping on steroids. So kind of come from like the real estate-esque industry. My grandparents have a background in some form of real estate, and it was kind of just like in my blood. And I didn't realize it. For whatever reason in college, I really thought that I wanted to like be in, real estate investing. Didn't know what that meant, how to do it, but talked to a bunch of real estate agents at that time and basically found, hey, you have to have a lot of money to do this. And being a broke college kid, it makes no sense, but hey, learning curve, it was a learning opportunity. But ultimately that kind of transitioned me to fall in love with the real estate market, have a lot of relationships with real estate agents, lenders, leasing agents, and take a look at the tech. So the GIS side of my background, I think, is what also let me fall in love with technology. And then I kind of blended them together to start Structurally right from school.
Amazing. So Nate, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, when you say GIS, what do you mean by GIS?
Yeah, it's Geographic Information Systems, which sounds fancier than it is, but it's basically, mapping on steroids is what I like to say. You're drawing lines, you're looking at topographical maps, you're analyzing things on a map, basically, and ideally putting it on the web or the internet in a way that others can access it or use it.
Okay, fantastic. So this was your first thing, and what was it in the tech stack of real estate that really led you to see this like soft spot in the market that you could really serve?
Yeah, so it came from interviewing hundreds of agents. I mean, interviewing is probably a little too formal, just talking to them. And I mean, it just kept coming up that real estate agents and salespeople as a whole really hate and struggle with following up and qualifying leads. Behind the scenes stuff is hard for everyone. As a salesperson, they're usually high D or high I. They love to be face to face. They love to get in the weeds. They love to be at the closing table and making relationships. It's what they're best at. But that's typically not where sales are like always won. The sales are won behind the scenes, constant follow-up, constant qualification, constantly staying in touch with people. And that was a struggle. And that's what I kept hearing in one way or the other, talking to real estate agents. And I looked at the market as a whole and said, this could probably be solved with like humans, just like a call center. And it has time and time again. Call centers have been around for 20 plus years. But I felt coming out of school, because I had relationships with folks from Iowa State University, where I graduated from, in the PhD statistics and mathematics department. I knew conversational AI, or AI as a whole, was at a point where it could actually take a bite out of this problem, following up and qualifying leads, rather than just throwing a human call center or throwing a bunch of people at it. So I kind of put that idea together with very smart people in the PhD program at Iowa State to start Structurally.
Interesting. So there's a couple different directions that we can take this conversation, and I kind of want to take it both. I mean, having never had a job, you find this soft spot in the market. The one track that I want to go down first is talking to you just about like what goes into it as an entrepreneur trying to put this together, because I mean, you don't have any experience in that. And I'm sure there was like some fear in that. And then I want to get into the conversation around conversational AI. But first, let's talk just about like your mindset and what it took in those early days to really get going. Did you start with the product? Did you start with the business building? Just take us through that whole, chapter.
Yeah. So in kind of the startup world, but I think in all businesses, the thing that you always have to start with is a minimum viable product. I think you can use that for any situation. And that's where we were led to. We wanted to say, okay, we think there's a problem here, a soft spot, like you said. We think we have a solution for it. So let's prove without investing a lot of resources that it actually makes sense. So what I actually did with my minimal tech background was build a very rudimentary MVP. And I took it, I remember, to a local brokerage's office and demoed it. It was like super hacked together. I promise it literally did not work. I don't know. It was kind of like Wizard of Oz scene behind the scenes, like making it work with duct tape and whatever. But it worked enough for them to say, yeah, I can see how that would make sense. And that gave me enough kind of juice to take it a little bit further with actual developers, again, who I met from Iowa State. And again, not a very like productized product, but we actually spent a little bit of money to exhibit at a few of the big conferences in real estate, Inman News and NAR. We just bought super cheap like exhibitor packages there, took our very half-baked, not even half-baked product, and talked to, thousands of agents that came by our booth and just said, hey, what do you think? Hey, what do you think? Does this make sense? Would you buy it? What would you buy it for? How would you use it? And I feel like that was just the best experience I could have ever had, was even just so little invested in the product, but we went to the market face to face and validated the idea enough to actually get like a sign up list of kind of pre-subscribers that ultimately was our basis to raise some like seed funding on, to say, hey, we have so much interest that there's a couple thousand agents interested in this once it's live. Let's go build it because we have some proof here. And that ultimately was kind of our founding story, I would say.
Very interesting. So I would agree with you that even if you're in the real estate sales business, you have to have some type of minimum viable product. And really for a realtor, it's what is your value proposition to buyers and sellers? And if you haven't defined that, then you really have no way to go test the market and see if this business is going to be for you. So you create this very rudimentary thing. And one of the things you said was without investing capital. And so you really were even taking a principle that I teach our agents here, which is to be prospecting based and marketing enhanced. You didn't put the cart before the horse and go spend thousands and thousands of dollars to test the market. You really in a grassroots way, you went to market with as little capital as possible and really determined, is this something that fulfills a need? And what you found is it did. And I can tell you why, because realtors are always looking for a shortcut. And I'm not calling conversational AI a shortcut in a negative. I'm just saying that a realtor is always willing to look at something that solidifies, in a weakness that most have. Like you said, high D, high I personalities. We're not good at the follow-up. Most businesses lost in that follow-up and nurture stage. And so you put this together. It's all working. And then, it seems like you saw some success pretty fast after those trade shows. I was doing some research and I think you were like in Housing Wire's like top 100, like most innovative things. I'm sure you've been recognized in other things. So what did like the next aspect of growth look like? You're a young CEO running this brand new company. What was the next part? Did you have to hire sales? Did you then dump a bunch of capital? Did you raise money? How did that, what was the next step?
Yeah. So I would like to say that like early on as a new CEO, like you said, I had two really beneficial, benefactors. I had my co-founder who's great at sales. And when we raised that initial seed round, we actually decided to take on a board of directors. And that board of directors came with people who have built 5+ businesses, one of which is actually now our current CEO, and one of which has taken two companies public from Iowa, which is really fun and rare to do, but becoming increasingly common here in Iowa. But leaning on their expertise as a board was, we couldn't have done it without it. We would have never seen things coming around the corner. We basically had to humble ourselves and say, we have no idea what we're doing. We need your expertise. But I always like to say, in starting a business in any way, one of the best combinations is having the naivete of us young founders who say, yeah, sure, anything's possible. We'll do it. We have the energy to do it. Let's just do it. We don't know what this market is like. So anything's possible. Sure, let's go for it. But then we also have the experience of those that have been there, done that, seen around the corner and say, here's what you need to be looking out for. We're not saying that, you can't do all these things that you think are possible, but be aware of these things. But then I would also say the other side, my co-founder, Andrew, whenever you're starting a business, you never want to like outsource sales. Your first place that you want to, the first place that you want to validate is, can I build a repeatable sales model? And that's what Andrew really did on the sales side of things he sold the first couple $1 million of revenue for the company. And that process alone over time built really strong ideas and inroads to say, where do we need to invest our sales and marketing resources moving forward? So really it was founder-led sales, helped by our board of directors. And we continuously refined our product over that time. So we obviously were moving from an MVP to what our now CEO likes to call our MLP, minimum lovable product. And that's kind of where we've been investing to date.
I have a couple questions based on what you just said there. I agree with you that you have to ask the question, can I create a sustainable recurring sales model? But for someone trying to digest that, why is that so important in any business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of our, this sounds a little demeaning, but it's not at all. It's really important for leaders. But salespeople should be coin operated. You know what you give them, you know what you should get out, essentially. So especially for real estate agents too, thinking about building a team, like if you're thinking about bringing someone on, if you don't know what you're putting in, resources, where they're going, what the leads they're going to focus on, who they're trying to sell to, what's their value prop, that's what's going in. You don't know what you're going to get out. So that was what Andrew and myself, but mostly Andrew, were trying to define. What are we giving them? Who's our ideal customer profile? How are we selling to them? What is our typical close rate or time to close as well? So that we knew when we invested in hiring a sales team, which we now have a sales team, they know what to expect. We know what to expect, and we can continue to scale it that way.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And I totally agree. I love the wisdom that you just distilled there. I think it's applicable to all real estate business. And the other thing I've picked up on, Nate, you use the word humble, and humility is something that gets thrown around a lot when someone says, who are you looking for in your world? Well, I get thrown out all the time. Someone that's hungry, humble, and smart. And I love it. Right. And like, that humility has to come from somewhere. So, as a founder who starts to experience some success, what is humility, and how does a leader humble themselves to listen to a board, to actually, you made a conscious decision to put yourself under the leadership of a board. How'd you arrive? Is that something you feel like your parents instilled in you? Just talk to me a little bit about humility.
Well, I always like to say there's this old saying that goes around in Iowa called Iowa nice. So that's part of it. We're all pretty nice folks here. And I think that comes from the little we're mostly farmers, and farmers are typically keep to themselves humble folks. But I do define kind of humility too as something that our board actually has talked about with us, and that I've heard around investors and such, is when you're looking to hire someone, rather than just being humble, you want to hire someone who is a learn-it-all and not a know-it-all. And I think that is literally the definition, or at least my definition of humility. When you have someone come in that says, I know everything, I'm going to do it my way. Sure, there's definitely some aspect of that is important, especially when you're hiring someone senior. I've been there, done that. I know how to do it, but it's a little bit more about like how they position that. And especially when you're actually inexperienced like we were, we literally don't know it all. We know nothing. We have to be learn-it-all founders. So I think that we've been told that is kind of our MO. It's what it's something that people see in us. And I think that that's what we try and look for in new hires too, is especially, if you're thinking about making new hires too, I would definitely recommend looking at learn-it-all employees and learn-it-all executives, because that's where you want to hire people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a foundational principle of our company at Keller Williams, Arizona. You need to be someone who's learning based. And I don't care if you come to us having, brought multiple companies public and are doing 100 million in sales in real estate, or you're just starting out. Like, learning based, that's where the infinite game really should be played and is won, so to speak, if we put it in those terms. You also display some of that humility in being a founder who recognized the need to bring in a new CEO. And so I also want to talk about that because, I'm dealing with a lot of realtors who have spent a lifetime establishing a real estate business, and now they're trying to peel themselves away. And in a sense, they're founders, right? And it's kind of hard to walk away and turn over the reins to someone else. And so walk me through, if you don't mind, a little bit of what that dynamics look like. How did you come to a place to know that, hey, it's time for me to step aside as a founder and do what I'm best at, and bring someone in who has a different set of skills? Yeah,
it's definitely been, again, a learning curve for us. I've never had a boss per se too. So that's been something that I've been personally trying to figure out, is how do I work for someone? Because usually entrepreneurs and founders have a very natural tendency to not be very good at that. So they have to go start their own job and work for no one. But that's a different story. I would say that maybe just take a step back and think about like how you got into being an entrepreneur or a founder, and what is your goal? The goal that I've always heard from our board and other successful leaders is, from day one, your job as a founder is to replace yourself in everything you do. When you start your business, you're wearing a ton of hats. You're a generalist, you're doing marketing, you're doing sales, you're doing product, you're doing finance, you're doing accounting, everything. Over time, your goal is to replace yourself in various parts of those roles. And this so happens to be replacing yourself entirely. But, being a CEO or being an executive has its own challenges. Being a very true CEO to a growth stage company means a lot of management, a lot of HR, a lot of recruiting, a lot of one-on-ones. Basically, managing people is all you do. Fundraising, that's all you do. There's no really like in the weeds, getting your hands dirty, going out and writing a blog or, making a sale. Typically, you're managing the machine that is doing that now. And if you think about that as just another part of the job that you're replacing yourself as, that's how I looked at it. I know that I'm not terribly good at fundraising. I'm not terribly good at managing 20, 30, 40, 50 people. I'm not very good at managing board relationships, which is another job of a CEO when you have a board at least. Those are things that I frankly wasn't good at, don't really like to do, and wanted to replace myself on. I'm very interested in being product led. I love product. I like marketing. And that's where I wanted to focus on specifically. And and just realizing that like early on, your goal is actually to replace yourself. And I think just coming to terms with that for anyone in a founder position is really important, because the goal is actually to replace yourself in your business too.
Yeah, that's such a good leadership principle. And when we talk, we have a lot of real estate teams inside my brokerage, and we talk about the shift from salesmanship to leadership. And I usually position that under 3 R's and say, hey, as a leader, your goal is to reach your people, ready them, and release them into big opportunities. That's how you know you made it. A 4th R we could add to that is replace, because as you create a business that you want to step away from and keep as an additional income stream in building wealth, replacement is so key. And I love what you said too. The founder is moving from being a generalist to really a specialist. And it's the same way in any business. Real estate sales, right? You're doing all the paperwork, you're doing all the marketing, you're doing all the follow-up and the nurture and all these things. And as you start to scale, you need to be willing to become a specialist and let go of, pry open your hands and let those other things fall to people who are more skilled. And that's what you've done. And that really kind of naturally, moves into this topic of like, as someone specializing, follow-up, conversational AI, nurturing leads, artificial intelligence. I mean, the place in history we find ourselves, Nate, I mean, it's NFTs, it's metaverse, it's Oculus, it's Meta. I mean, there's all these different things. And so I really just want to pick your brain a little bit on like what you're seeing in the real estate universe as it pertains to artificial intelligence. I mean, are you... I don't even know what question to start with. And so like, just give us like this broad landscape of like conversational AI, the advancements, go anywhere you want. I'm just giving you open season.
So the one thing too quick that I wanted to note on your 3 or 4 R's, I have a 5th just to consider that our CEO always likes to say is, as a CEO, you're often the chief reminding officer. All you do is remind people of our goals, what we're doing, constantly just reminding people, and you have to just keep doing it. Otherwise they might get astray a little bit. So I often find myself, even as a founder, being a chief reminding officer as well.
So good.
But yeah, in terms of conversational AI or just AI in general, I would say in real estate I would actually take a step back even further and say AI in general is very confusing to know what is actually AI, what isn't. Everyone, just like with Meta and the metaverse and all that, everyone's kind of attaching those phrases along with AI to like everything. So one thing that I always like to say, I've even started kind of a thought leadership group called Impactful AI to focus on doing just this, is dispelling the myths of AI. There is a lot of myths around AI that, it can learn on its own. It can just produce things that it's never seen before. It's self-learning. It doesn't need any training. It'll just randomly make things up. None of those things are yet very true. Artificial intelligence, while it's come a long way, especially in the last 5 years, still has a long way to go. I would say that the most advanced publicly available form of AI that's close to your science fiction ideas, even in real estate, or it can be applied kind of anywhere, is this model produced by a company called OpenAI, which is actually a former Elon Musk company, called GPT-3. And this model essentially just does kind of science fiction-y things where you can tell it a prompt is what it's called. And you tell it to do something and it will do that thing. So you could send it a message and say, hey, write me a children's story. It'll do its best to write a children's story and it will come out pretty well. Hey, write me a new blog post about SEO or something. It'll write a blog post. So it's all based on natural language. It's all a natural language text-based model that's actually been trained on the largest data set of text ever invented. Essentially, it's taken all of the open available text it can from the internet and has been processed and trained in a way that lets it do these very sophisticated, general, open-ended tasks. So I think that like if you're looking about where is AI today, that's like the most advanced publicly available thing that I think we have.
So how would you then define artificial intelligence then? Can you just give us a baseline definition?
I always like to say, and this is from a PhD in math and stats, our AI, one of our
Oh
AI.
boy, so it's going to go over all of our heads, especially mine.
No, he actually distills it to a super simple way, and he defines AI as basically a task that historically a human has done, a computer can now do at a very simple level. And so if you think about those things in conversational AI, where we focus, historically, it's taken a human to have a conversation. Okay. Now AI can do that. It can interpret the things that someone is saying, generate a response, and actually have a conversation. Other forms of AI, even in real estate, are, like the Zestimate. I know that'll perk some ears up, but that's a form of predictive analytics or a subset of AI that is using tons of data to do something that a human used to do or still does do, appraise the value of a property. So that is in itself a form of AI as well. And there's so many different avenues of AI. There's generative AI, predictive analytics, conversational AI. There's just so many that I think I hope that everyone listening, when you hear that term, give it some thought to say, are they just using it as a marketing word? Do they actually use it? And how might they actually use it? Because it's important that we're not just slapping that term on everything that we do.
Yeah. So would it be safe to say that artificial intelligence then, especially as it pertains to when I'm thinking, okay, do I add this tool or resource to my business? I mean, it should be something that saves me time, money, energy, right? I mean that's a pretty safe statement, right?
Yeah. And I would also say that there's always been a huge fear of, will AI just replace me? I think that's become increasingly less of a fear, but it's still probably on everyone's minds. Like, how could it replace me? Where might it replace other tools, people or processes? I would say that at least where we're at today, in my overarching view of AI as a whole, is AI's goal is to reduce humans' level of mundane tasks. Basically, there are certain things that humans just shouldn't be doing anymore. In my opinion, getting rejected constantly over and over and over on cold calls is one of those things that we as humans don't like doing. We hate it. It's not fun for us to get on 100 phone calls in a day, get told to, shut up and never talk to me again. That hurts. Not fun. We've all been through it, but AI doesn't care. And that's a place where I think that you're going to see, in my opinion, AI will replace those mundane tasks that we all hate. So if you think about kind of where we fit in, you could theoretically say, sure, maybe Structurally's conversational AI could replace my need for hiring an inside sales agent, an ISA. We don't believe that at all. In fact, our best users are actually ISA teams themselves because of what I just said. Historically, ISA teams have been responsible for cold calling constantly, getting rejected 99% of the time. That wears on them. ISA teams have very high turnover. That market does as a whole because of that reason. It's exhausting, it's tiring, it's hard. But the reason why ISAs love our product so much is because we're the first line of defense. We augment their role. AI is here to augment people's roles, not replace them. And I think that as a whole, at least for now, from what I can see, that is the general goal of AI moving forward, is to augment people's roles, not to replace them.
Maybe we could say, and I'm definitely not even close to being qualified to talk about this. I remember though reading like in the Wall Street Journal or something when there's self-driving trucks, right? And I don't know if I guess you define that as artificial intelligence with that definition. But I don't think in that article it talked about it's not replacing the truck driver. It's it's just evolving the truck driver's responsibility and role inside of that world. And so you used the language of augmenting that person's role. And really, that's what we've been doing for centuries and millennia, is simply augmenting and evolving, changing the roles and responsibilities that someone has in their world. And it's always led to, positive things, negative things as well, right? This isn't a philosophy discussion. However, I really like where you're going there. So talk to me a little bit about how best practices with conversational AI. Real estate agents are starting to experiment. They're like, man, this is very interesting. More and more people perhaps are getting chat bots on their websites and things like that. What are some best practices? Where do you see this right now in the landscape of real estate agents' business?
Yeah. So the one thing I'll say too before this is I really appreciate your kind of evolutionary approach. I think, Keller Williams wise, Gary Keller's been known to say that data is the new oil. And that is in part, evolutionary term. Oil was the new oil at some point, and there was something before that. But in data, I completely agree with that entire philosophy that he preaches, because data is the fuel for AI as a whole. There's no AI without tons and tons of very labeled intensive data. But in terms of where I think agents can think about using conversational AI today is in terms of lead qualification. So I think that one place that we often overlook in terms of sales and leads is, we're always chasing the new shiny lead. We're never thinking about the old lead that you always paid for, or that you already paid for. We're always, can I generate a new one? They're warmer, they're hotter, they were just on my website, and that's fair. And that's a place that at least our product fits really well. But I think one of the places that every agent can look is, how many leads haven't heard from me in a while? How many have I paid for 6 months ago that either I forgot to reach out to, didn't reach out to enough, or there was no end. So the sales methodology that we always like to employ it structurally for our reps is get to an answer. Is it a yes, no, or there is nothing in between? Is it a yes or a no? We have to get to an answer, and a no is okay. But there's probably so many leads in everyone's database or CRM today that you have no idea what they're doing. But over time, everyone's going to move, and you want to make sure that you're the first, you're top of mind. So that's obviously a huge kind of philosophy for real estate agents, is being top of mind and timely when people are thinking about moving. AI is a really good opportunity for you to do that, because it doesn't give up on responding. We're very aggressive with our follow-up, at least our product is, and we're respectful and human-like. So I would say that if you're thinking about tinkering with chatbots or AI, go in with the philosophy too of, do I want this to appear very robotic? I'm sure everyone's experienced what that's like. You go to a website, the little thing pops up. It's obviously a robot. You probably say a few things and then kind of get mad because that experience sometimes doesn't work. Our product, at least that we built going into this, was it's going to be indistinguishable from human. And there's nothing wrong with being very robotic. I think that if you're just thinking about tinkering with chatbots or AI, you have to go in with one or the other, though. Is this going to be an extension of my sales team that's going to act, talk, and behave like a human? Or is it just going to be like a robot that kind of filters out people really rudimentarily on their website?
So if this is supposed to be indistinguishable from humans, I mean, is the best practice with your software? I mean, are you attaching real names to the messages that are going out and all of that?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So our product and most AI products are, you can kind of give it a name, but a lot of them that you've probably seen on sites are like, robot the roboty. And it's just going to be very clear that it's a bot. But we always like to make people on our platform give it an actual personality. Pretend like it's a member of your team. So we see tons of names, from Alex to Otto is one of my favorites. But it's literally an extension of the team, so much so that we've even had a bunch of our customers say, how do I handle when a lead comes into the office and asks for the AI? Because they thought it was a human. And we've heard that so many times that we say, well, at that point, you probably should tell them it was AI. But some of them have even said like, oh, Alex is out of the office or on vacation for a week, so he can't talk to you right now. But it's fun. It makes it feel like they're an actual member of your team, which I also think is super important.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, then you're treating the AI as an additional member of your team, not John is on my team, and so all messages going out in our conversational AI say John on them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't I do that?
We don't want it to, our best practice is not to position it as an actual agent on your team. Like say that, you were a user of ours, David, and we would not say, name your bot David, and give the impression that it was you.
Why is that?
What we've actually seen is it kind of confuses customers. But what we've actually seen is if you position it as an assistant, leads open up more. They don't feel like they're talking to a licensed salesperson per se, whose entire goal in life is to just sell, sell, sell. That's what they think. When they feel that, hey, they kind of just get, they let their guard down a little bit. Hey, this is Alex, David's assistant here at Keller Williams. How can I help? Sure. Yeah. I'm going through a divorce. I need to sell my house. And I can't tell you how many people we've seen just literally open up with their life stories. It's almost bizarre and crazy, but we've processed millions of conversations. We've actually seen that 99.9% believe they're talking to a human. So I think a lot of that actually does come from putting a lot of thought into it. Like we put purposeful typos that we correct, we put emojis, we put GIFs, but it also does come from the fact of who we position it as, which is an assistant more times than not.
Very interesting. Thanks for helping me with that best practice there. So I mean, we're recording this, around the turn of the year. It's a time where I'm frequently consulting agents on their business and on adding different structures, no pun intended with structurally, but to their business to really create a well-rounded, who's the best type of agent to start using conversational AI? Is it someone who just has a deep backlog of these old leads, or does it really have a place in any agent's business?
Yeah, I would say that we typically are working with not brand new agents. So, maybe 2 or 3 years in, ideally teams with a decent amount of lead volume will find the best bang for their buck kind of initially with Structurally. I would say it's important to get your systems right to start. It's just when you don't have a significant database or a significant lead volume yet, you're trying to build that up. So newer agents probably aren't going to be our best fit, frankly. But I would say that kind of generally too, when you're thinking about how to potentially fit conversational AI into your tech stack, think about your lead pipeline. And I always like to recommend, you need to have a healthy lead pipeline. You need to have leads from all different sources. You need to have portal leads that you pay for. You need to have pay-per-click leads. You need to have sphere of influence leads. And however you kind of, or, past client sphere of influence leads. And however you kind of divvy that up in your pipeline doesn't matter too much. But to a product like conversational AI too, when you're thinking about like your PCSOI, or past client sphere of influence, that frankly is not a great fit for conversational AI. The last thing that you would want to do is send your buddy to a digital assistant whose sole job is to basically qualify the lead. Like, no, you already have a personal relationship with them. that is not a great opportunity for a product like Conversational AI. It's really meant for those old leads that might have come from pay-per-click or portals or wherever, or those new leads that are coming from those same similar sources regularly.
Okay, I'm really glad that you made that distinction there, because I think there is a tendency among agents, whether it's conversational AI or just any type of leverage, to leverage out the wrong things. And past client sphere of influence, certainly something that, when I get your explanation, seems to make sense. So, I mean, kind of take us then into that's kind of the current landscape. Like, take us into the future then. If AI really isn't as sci-fi and advanced necessarily in our day-to-day life, at least as business owners, like where does it go next? Yeah.
So I think it comes back to the point that I was talking about with like GPT-3. And that is in my opinion, like I said, it's kind of the most sci-fi-ish AI product in the market today. And I think that we're going to see a ton more there in the very near future, especially in the form of writing content. So I actually was just reading a tweet before this that when you're writing when you're running a business, like 99% of your life is writing. You're writing copy, you're writing contracts, you're writing job descriptions, you're writing constantly, you're writing documentation. And that is especially true for sales and marketing teams generally. There's a stat out there too by salesforce.com that said sales reps actually only spend 1/3 of their time selling. So they spend 2/3 of their time not selling. That's crazy, especially in sales, who's so commission-based. And in real estate, you're exclusively commission-based for the most part. And if you're spending 2/3 of your time not actually selling, like, you're not making money. But all the behind the scenes stuff does take a ton of time, scheduling appointments, updating your CRM. One of the places where I've seen a ton of time get lost is in writing content, writing sales copy, writing messages for follow-up, writing blogs, writing property descriptions. And I think that with this move towards what GPT-3 is, which is generally referred to as like generative AI, it's doing things for you. It's writing things for you. It's creating things for you. I think this move towards generative AI is going to cut into that pie chart, if you will, and actually kind of flip the tides to say sales reps especially are going to actually spend the majority of their time selling, because they're going to have AI that's writing things for them now, that's creating content for them. And then ideally with other products like ours, that's actually having conversations for you. So I think, again, it comes down to what is AI going to cut out and eliminate from your life that is mundane and give you time to actually spend at the closing table, which is kind of where we all want to be.
That's the enjoyable piece, the piece that, I assume all of us would agree humans should be spending their time. It's a fascinating discussion, and I really love it. Even though I'm definitely not an expert, I love talking to experts like you, because there's just elements of psychology and sociology and philosophy all at play with this stuff. Do you see any downsides to artificial intelligence, or what's your perspective on like cons?
Yeah, so there's a whole field of study for like bias in AI, and many big companies are even writing basically like full on, obviously like ethical documents about what their AI will and won't do. But even a lot of companies are writing programs, writing apps, developing apps that are their sole purpose is to basically audit their applications for any bias. So I think that when you're thinking about like that GPT-3 model, again, like they trained it on the internet. They scraped the largest amount of text they could from the internet, for lack of a better term here, and how they actually did it. But there's naturally going to be a significant amount of bias from humans in that. And that's a huge con. I would say that the best way to prevent that is to do, at different scales, what we do, even at Structurally, which is to have a human in the loop system. And that ideally is catching those things, tagging the data in a way that is not biased, and making sure that it doesn't happen again. Because, I don't think that AI engineers, who are the ones actually building this stuff, have any intention for their models or products to be biased. It's just, again, AI doesn't exist without data. And a lot of the data on the internet is naturally not pretty. And, humans have a natural tendency to be biased in odd and not great ways sometimes. And so I think that if we're constantly building kind of safety nets to catch those in real time and kind of after the fact, that's a good way to prevent a lot of that bias.
I was listening to, I think it was Dax Shepard and Reid Hoffman talk a few weeks ago, all about this whole like digital ethics and, companies like Facebook having these, entire departments now devoted to this thing. And I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here a little bit just to say, like, do you think it's possible to eliminate the bias, or do we have, even with a human in the loop, like there's, undoubtedly bias, right? So like, what are your thoughts on that?
I do think it is possible to maybe not fully eliminate it, but to audit it. If you think about, like, you are putting me on the spot, so I'm thinking about this on the fly. But if you think about, like, I
apologize. Don't hold Nate to any of this. We are just two friends musing here.
if you think about like the time frame of humans, like all of our information has been written and collected, but not like categorized, right? It's written in books, it's on pieces of paper, and we're moving now towards digitizing it. And with that movement, like even Structurally has seen this. We process millions of conversations, and there's so much valuable data in that conversation that we could even look at our database of leads and say, okay, show me all the leads who mentioned they're going through divorce, they're not working with an agent, and they want to move in the next 2 months. Before conversational AI, that would have been impossible unless you combed through millions of messages constantly. And that's what's happening at a much broader scale, I think, with the world's information. So I think that, like, society has said certain things that are biased, but it's never been like documented. It's just been like, we said it here, we wrote it here, we read it here, but now it's being digitized, documented, and audited. And I think that like, as a whole, one thing that we found is software is consistent. If it's one thing that's way better, that it's way better at than humans, is software is notoriously consistent. If you tell it to do something, it's going to do something, unlike a human. So I think that with this digitization of, I guess, all of humanity's information, we're going to be able to audit our biases a little bit more, know where they're at, and at least do something with them. I don't know if we can get rid of them, but I think we can at least better acknowledge them than we've ever been able to before.
Okay, I'm put on the spot, Nate. Ladies and gentlemen, Nate Joens. That's super helpful, and it's worthy of we could get a whole round table and spend an entire episode just on that, because it is a fascinating conversation with the scale at which we can comb through data and make more informed decisions is, it's unprecedented, and even in our lifetimes. You and I both, I presume, are probably around a similar age. We've walked through just, the progressive, amount of information that can be stored in these devices and recalled, so quickly. And it's just a fascinating time to live in, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Nate, this has been a lot of fun talking to you about all these things and really just kind of charting the course of you as an entrepreneur and what you're going through. I know some huge things are in store, but I want to transition us into the last segment of our show, which is 3, 2, 1 action. It's the same 3 questions I ask every guest. Now you're really on the hot seat. You ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. Question number one. Who has had the biggest impact on your business and why?
If it's not one person, I'll say it's the board. It's our board. And they have to, since they're on our board, but they didn't have to be mentors, I would say. And, coming from Iowa, it's such a small community. There are not very many mega startups here in Iowa. And, we just kind of want to see ourselves and others succeed. And they really have extended their neck to help me and my co-founder, Andrew, succeed. So, they're on our board for a reason, and we really appreciate them.
Awesome. Question number two is, what book has had the most significant impact on you and why?
Yeah. So a little known fact about me is I don't read a lot of books. I love reading blogs, though. I take in as much as I possibly can via bite-sized information. I think that sometimes blogs just get full of words to make them longer, and blogs are the bite-sized version of those. So I'll give you a blog if that works. And it's
Perfect.
very specific to structure or to software companies. So sorry about that, but it's called SaaStr. I think that there's a lot of, so SaaS stands for software as a service. And it's just SaaStr, a play on words. And
the non-techie guy knew that.
You did. Okay, perfect. And I think that it's such a funny name because like the guy who founded it sold his company to Adobe for tons of money back in the early tech days. But his advice is so instrumental for founders of all kinds. I really wish he would rename it so it could just be like, I don't know, something for all founders, because I really do think it applies to founders across the board.
Very cool. I love it. It's obviously one that we've never gotten on our show before, and I hope everyone, I'm going to definitely go check it out. So thank you for that. Question number three, and actually, you know what? It reminded me too of, I'm reading a book right now called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and Naval says something extremely similar. He says like, oh, I read like 2 or 3 pages, and if it doesn't catch my interest, I'm done, and I don't feel bad about that. And so it's very naval-esque. So anyway, question number 3. This is the All In podcast, where really our goal is to encourage our listeners to take massive action on their goals. So if you had to give one piece of advice, Nate, to any business owner out there, and what they could do to move the needle forward in their business today, what would it be?
Yeah, so I would really like to say invest in AI, because AI is also the initials of the All In podcast. But I'll give something a little more practical here, and it comes back to my earlier statement that be a learn-it-all founder. You don't know it all. You want to hire someone who's smarter than you in any department, and that's the goal. It's not that you're losing control of the company and you're losing impact and you're losing decision-making ability. It's your goal going into whatever you've done, starting a business for yourself as a real estate agent. Your goal is to replace yourself, ideally. And that might at some point mean actually retiring, but that's okay too.
That's perfect advice. There's another R for our R's. So love it. Hey, I know that our listeners are going to want to learn more about you, about Structurally. So, I mean, where's the best place for them to connect, to either find more of your content or connect with Structurally?
Yeah, so I like to put my money where my mouth is. And I want people to test AI. So go to testyouraiassistant.com, and you can actually try ours out. You can pretend like you're a lead. So fill out the form, get a text, an email, and talk to our AI as if you were a lead. The one caveat I always like to say, though, is give it a little slack. What we see often here when people try this is they'll say like, hey, when are we going to find aliens and what planet will they come from? Like, that's not how leads talk. We'll have an answer that'll be a decent answer for weird questions like that, but really try and be a lead if you're going to test out the product. Throw it for a loop. We want to try and handle those things, and we do, and have invested a lot there, but be a little reasonable.
All right. So test your AI assistant.
.com. Yep.
All right. We'll link that up in the show notes, Nate. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I hope I get to see you at, some big real estate event and meet sometime. Talk more of these things. Thanks so much for spending time with our audience. I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely, David. Looking forward to seeing you around.
All right. See you, Nate. Guys, that's been another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.